Do you love audiobooks? You can get a free 30-day trial membership to audible.com by visiting audibletrial.com/divebarrockstar. They have thousands of audiobook titles, as well as podcasts, guided wellness programs, theatrical performances, A-list comedy, and exclusive Audible originals you won't find anywhere else. Get your free trial membership at audibletrial.com/divebarrockstar. Welcome to the Dive Bar Rockstar podcast, a show exploring the lives of professional musicians of all types, touring musicians, recording artists, songwriters, engineers, bar bands, wedding bands, and anyone making their living in the music industry. Whether you've dreamed of being a professional or you already are one, this is the podcast for you. I'm your host, Eric Baines, and I hope that you not only find some entertainment here, but also some helpful tips, trade secrets, and ideas that will help you achieve your dreams. The podcast is officially launched, has been for, I guess, about 2.5 weeks now. So I wanted to start out by just saying thank you for everybody who's listening and enjoying it. It feels like I'm getting some really, well, I am getting some, it doesn't just feel like it. I am getting some really good feedback, and it seems like people are enjoying the podcast for the reasons that I wanted them to, which is always a good feeling, because it's been really fun for me to get to know my friends a little better and my colleagues, and be able to sort of, showcase them. And it feels like everyone is kind of listening for those same reasons. So I guess mission accomplished. It always feels good for it to be received for the reasons that I'm doing it. I would like to ask one favor, though. If you guys are out there, no matter where you're listening, if you could, give us a 5-star rating, and maybe if you have a little extra time, to leave a review so that more people will be exposed to the podcast and be able to enjoy it as well. My guest today is one of those folks that is a great friend of mine, and he's also a great bass player. And he's had a really diverse career, which is kind of paralleled mine in a way, in some weird ways. We talk all about it, but because we've subbed for each other a bunch. But he's also gone from smooth jazz to rock to pop gigs and Disney gigs and country and bar bands and stuff. And he's had quite a great career, and he's worked really hard over the years to achieve it. Right now, his 2 main gigs are Gwen Stefani and Shania Twain, so that doesn't suck. But he's also played with Paulina Rubio, Daniel Powder, Mindy Abair and the Bone Shakers, Air Supply, Jeff Golub, Ali and AJ, Brian Auger, Shakira, Christina Aguilera, Peter White, Jackson Brown, and the list goes on and on and on, like a lot of guests. He also has a solo record out called Let the Games Begin, and he is just now finishing up a new one called 11 Years Later, which will be out in early September. So enjoy my conversation with my friend Derek Frank. Thanks for coming.
My pleasure.
And especially in these COVID times, showing up. We're 6 feet away, I think.
Yeah, something like that.
That's good. It's legal.
Yeah, right on. We're within the legal limits of space, social distancing.
Yeah, which is a trip, man. Like, it's illegal to do our job right now.
Isn't that crazy?
That's a little odd.
Yeah, it's kind of like Footloose, where like music's illegal. I guess dancing was illegal. I don't know.
Ooh, it's the cult of COVID-19.
Yeah, crazy.
Anyways,
crazy.
So you are currently doing 2 really awesome gigs. You're a pretty lucky dude.
I'm very fortunate. Absolutely. Yeah.
So you were, and the weird part is too, they both have Las Vegas residencies.
That was, the planets aligned on that one.
Yeah. So yeah, Gwen Stefani and Shania Twain.
Yep.
And you've been with Shania for a while.
Been with her on and off for about 5 years now. Yep.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And so before that, though, you were doing a lot of smooth jazz. I think we've had similar careers in a sense. Like, I was a smooth jazz guy, you were a smooth jazz guy, and now we're both doing country gigs. And how we got from there to there is just.
I know. I feel like we both kind of dabbled in a lot of the same things. Like, everything. I mean, you've done every kind of gig out there, and I feel like I have as well. You know, like smooth jazz stuff, rock, pop, teen pop. I mean, you know, you did High School Musical, and I did Ally and AJ and Victoria Justice.
Right.
I've done like the young bubblegum pop stuff, cover band stuff.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like, and then we both ended up on country gigs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
So do you approach each gig differently, or are you kind of, I'm Derek, this is what I do, and you just go and
pretty much, I mean, I pretty much just do whatever the gig requires, which usually is just the same thing. It's just play the parts, you know, perform, look like a rock star, you know,
right.
You know, just play the parts, play the songs, you know, and it's the same no matter what kind of gig it is, whether it's like a, you know, pop thing, a rock thing, you know, it's just,
but you don't have really a traditional country gig in a sense either. Cause
no, I mean, it's very much a pop gig.
It's more of a pop
approached
thing.
kind of the same way as a lot of the other pop gigs I've done, where, you know, you build the set and then the set never changes, where it's like you with Dwight, I know we've talked about, like, he changes the set all the time, and you're expected to know like his whole catalog,
right?
And he changes stuff up all the time, right?
Not arrangement wise necessarily, but yeah, there's parts of the show where he calls whatever he wants to call, and you got to know it all,
right?
For sure.
Yeah, I mean, Shania's not really like that. It's like once we've in every tour that I've done with her, every kind of situation, whether it's the Vegas residency, the promo tour, or, you know, like a tour, it's you decide on the set list ahead of time, or she decides on the set list ahead of time, and you work out all the transitions and intros and endings and all that stuff, and then that's it. Like, it stays the same.
Right.
Like, she never really shuffles stuff around. Same with Gwen. Like, well, at least when we do our Vegas show, it's been the same ever since we started. Like, we rehearsed a certain order, stayed that. And then when we go do other shows, like corporate shows or festivals, sometimes the show length is a little different, so we'll change it up a little bit. But really, we're drawing on the same batch of songs, you know, like 20 songs or something, and we may shorten that, play fewer songs, you know.
And do you like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's cool to change it up sometimes. I mean, I like when Gwen does other shows outside of Vegas, because we get to do that. We get to do extended versions of some songs, because in Vegas there's a couple that we've cut, like just so she can fit more songs in the show, because it's like a big greatest hits kind of show.
Right.
So some of the songs have been cut. The arrangements have been cut down to like a 2-minute version of the song. But then sometimes when we go out and do a festival or something, we'll do the full version. Because then certain songs, we won't do as many songs, but we'll do, you know, the full versions.
Right.
Yeah.
But you always know what's happening or what's going to happen.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. I mean, sometimes like we don't really find out the set list till the day of the show. But we all know it. There's nothing. Yeah. She's not going to throw a song at us that we don't know. Right. She's not going to be like, "What? You didn't listen to, you know, this B-side off of Tragic Kingdom?" You know.
Yeah. You know? Yeah. And I always kind of prefer that. Honestly, it makes me at ease when I'm about to go on stage and I know what's going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, in sound check, you know, if it's a festival or something, sometimes we won't really know exactly what we're doing until sound check. But then it's just like, okay, what version are we doing? Are we doing the full version, or are we doing the Vegas version?
Right.
And then that's easy. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And did you rehearse a lot with Gwen?
We did at first when we were building the Vegas show. We did like a month of rehearsals. And now we don't. Like, maybe we'll call a rehearsal here and there if like she wants to put together a new show for some of the corporate things we're doing or some of the festivals. We might like have 1 or 2 rehearsals here and there, but it's not frequent at all.
Got you.
Yeah. It's like we just rehearsed a month, got this show together, and then and she's real laid back.
Oh, cool.
Like even when we do shows outside of Vegas, it's kind of like we just decide in soundcheck, you know, what the set's going to be, and then like depending on the size of the stage, you know, whether or not we're running out front, or, you know, so it's she's real laid back, you know. It's cool. Just makes it fun and easy.
And Shania rehearses.
Well, I mean, the same thing before we did the Vegas residency, we built the show. We put the show together, but we only rehearsed for, I don't know, maybe 3 weeks. So not as long as Gwen. Then once that show started, it's like for each leg in Vegas, we'll show up like 2 days before, and we'll do like 2 days of rehearsal.
Gotcha. Like production rehearsal.
Like in the venue, just make sure everything works, make sure everybody remembers where they're supposed to be and all that.
You are amazing at like writing charts. You're a great guy to sub for. Maybe I should go back even to that, because the first time I ever played in Vegas was subbing for you, actually. Because I moved out here. I went to high school with a girl named Kay Kelly. You went to college with Kay Kelly.
Mm-hmm.
So she gave me your number and said, here, call my friend. And I called you up and, we hit it off. You needed a sub. You called me. Super grateful.
That's right. That was Joe's band or MVPs.
MVPs, at the Coral Reef Lounge in Mandalay Bay.
Yeah. Good times.
Man, it was good, but that gig kicked my ass a little, because it was like 8:30 to 2:30 in the morning and high energy the entire time.
Yeah. And for 5 or 6 nights in a row.
Yeah.
And I don't even want to mention what the pay was, but it was pretty low for what it was.
Right. Yeah.
It's like, man.
But for me at the time, I had just moved to town, really. So I was like, what? Dude, yes, I'll take it. Let's go.
Yeah. And for any of us that are like young and we're just kind of getting going, whatever, like those gigs are fine. Like, it was a lot, but I never complained about it. Like, I wasn't like, man, this is too much. I was just like, man, this is awesome. I'm playing in Vegas and getting paid, and this is just what it is. Now I look back on it, I wouldn't do that again. Now that I've kind of reached some other, my career has kind of grown from that. And now the thought of playing a 5-hour gig 6 nights in a row in the same venue, for what the money was, I was like, I wouldn't be able to do that now. But at the time, it was like, this is cool.
Yeah. And that's what qualifies you as a dive bar rock star.
Cool. Yep. I've been in the dive bars.
Yeah, we all started
in the trenches.
Yeah. But subbing for you is great. What I was leading to is that let me ask you this. Do you generally, when you're preparing for a gig, do you just chart things out regardless of the gig?
Always. Yep. And I know I'm going to memorize it, but for me, like, charting it out is a way to just like put it in my brain before, like, helps me kind of visualize it, like puts a visual element to it. So I always do that, whether it's Gwen, Shania, Air Supply, whatever. I chart everything out, and then I may use it for the, first couple of rehearsals, and then it just kind of, gets drilled into my brain that I don't need the charts anymore. But then I've got them in case I need to sub the gig out.
Right.
And then it's like, you make it so much easier for your sub, because he doesn't have to spend, a week learning a whole set of music. You can give him the charts, and it just makes it easy for him. Like, you filled in for me with Air Supply, and I had all the charts, and I had to sub out some Gwen stuff a while back, and I had all the charts for that as well, and it just makes things easier.
It's amazing. But I kind of approach it like, if I really want to do the gig and it's a really fun thing, it's easier for me to just memorize it, because the chart for me is like another step. If I start with the chart, it's gonna be a crutch for the rest. I played with Greg Karukas for 8 years. I read every single gig because I just never got off the charts. That's like another,
because you were able to. You didn't have to memorize it.
Exactly. Yeah, it was like another step. So I generally, if it's like a gig that I know I'm not reading charts on it, I'll just memorize it. And I say that as if it's easy, but I'll spend 8 to 10 hour days memorizing it.
That's cool. That's cool. And I do the same thing. Yeah, the charts can be a crutch sometimes. Like, when I was playing in Impulse, another gig that we've shared.
Right. Wedding band.
Yeah, wedding band. Great wedding band, though. Like, everything was charted out. A lot of them were like, I charted them out or whatever. But a lot of stuff I never really memorized, just because I didn't have to.
Right.
Because I had the charts. No one gave a shit if I was reading or not.
Everyone's reading. Yeah.
So I was just kind of like,
And it's the nature of the gig anyways, because they have a big book of charts. You show up and they're like, totally. Pick a 156,
Yeah, because you're playing stuff with like string sections and horn sections, and it's different all the time. And it's kind of, too much to memorize all of it.
Right.
But I there are other gigs that I do from time to time where I think, I should memorize this, but there are charts, so I'm using them. It's a crutch,
Yeah. Totally. Well, it's great for the subbing situation. I came up from Denver, and I worked there for 10 years before I moved here. And in Denver, you're kind of in a band. So the subbing thing didn't happen when I was there.
Right.
So when I moved out here in general, it was weird to just like, oh, this whole subbing thing is a big, weird thing, especially for me as a person who, like, I said I was going to do your gig and I will be at your gig. That's not really how it works out here.
Well, I mean, people are into so many different things out here that it's just the nature of the business, And I think, you can have a whole career without having a regular gig.
Yeah.
You can just be a sub and just sub on a ton of stuff.
Right.
And we both go through that from time to time. Like when our regular gigs aren't happening, we'll just be subbing on different things, you know?
Right. But I think when it comes time for me to have to sub out of something, I don't already have the charts. Like you have it already set up so that the subbing thing just works so well. You know, I'm always happy to sub for you because I know and you gave me a board or your in-ear mix on the air supply thing too. So because you sing some stuff, so you're like, oh, I turned up the vocals on this side and and the bass is up on this side, and I was like, this is easy.
Well, I just try to think like what would I want if I were coming into sub, and most of the time people don't do that for you. You know,
right?
Sometimes it's like, man, it's like pulling teeth just to get any information at all.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I've just kind of like if I need to sub out something to somebody, I want to think like, oh, what would I want if I were going to cover this gig?
Yeah.
So I just kind of do that. And it just makes it easier. Then like, your sub's going to do a good job because he has no excuse not to. He's got everything right there for him, you know?
Yeah. And I always also kind of think, and it's not necessarily true, but it's a good way of thinking for me. It's like my sub is representing me. So, if I send a bad sub, that means I did a bad gig.
Of course.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
So there's that fine line between like send a sub that's good and it's going to represent you well, but not going to be better than me and take the gig.
So everybody says, yeah.
But I generally never worry about it because especially if a guy's better than me, he's got other gigs. And like I don't really, I don't get so much into the competition of it. But
I don't either, man. I just figure, the guys that I call to sub for me, they're my friends. They're not going to be like in the artist's ear saying like, "Hey, I'm available." If you want me to do this next tour, it's like I know guys aren't going to do that.
Yeah,
because they know.
And generally, that's going to get you a bad reputation, anyways. It's not a good way to do business.
Yeah, that's not going to work out for you in the long run.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So you went to Miami University.
Yep, University of Miami. Yep.
And
I always have to correct that because Miami University.
There is too.
Yeah, there's a Miami University in Ohio.
Right.
Which is weird. And then University of Miami.
Right.
Yeah.
So you went to the real one.
I went to the one in Miami.
And how was that?
It's great.
A lot of good players.
So many great players. Yeah, great program, great players. I hated the city. Couldn't wait to get out of there. So I did my 4 years there, and then like I was gone. I had no intention of staying.
Oh wow.
It was just some places are a good fit for you and others aren't. And that was just at those places. It just never felt like home.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just did the college there, but man, so many great players. There's a lot of guys from Miami that from school that are here in LA that I play with a lot.
Yeah.
Still.
Yeah. Cool. So it's kind of like I went to Berkeley. It's kind of that same thing. You get out here and there's a pocket of people that you can just plug into.
Yeah. It's your network. I mean, that's kind of what kept me here is like, I came out here just to visit for a while, or I was going to spend the summer here. My parents were living out here and this was just kind of a transition for me. And I had some friends from college that were here gigging and they were just throwing me gigs right away. And I was like, oh man, no need to go anywhere else. Like I should just stay in LA.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So you didn't really ever dream of moving to LA and making it big?
No, it's interesting. I for some reason, I just didn't think of LA. Like my parents moved here when I was in college. And so I'd come to visit for spring break and stuff like that and holidays. But after college, I went to Boston and was with a girl, and she transferred to Berkeley. She was a singer, and I just went along because I didn't really know what I wanted to do or where I wanted to go. So I was like, yeah, I could gig in Boston. That did not happen.
Right.
That's one of those cities where it's like at the time it seemed like you're in a band that's working or you're not. Like like I was hoping I could just be like the freelance guy in the sub, but it just like wasn't working out that way. The gigs I did do were just like little jazz gigs that paid like $20,
Right.
So after less than a year, I decided to move. I was going to go to San Francisco. I had some friends there that were playing jazz and making a living at it. That's kind of where my head was at the time.
Gotcha.
So I was like, okay, well, I'll go to LA first because I was flat broke. And I was like, I'll live with my parents and, get a day job or something for the summer, save up a little money and then start again. But then I was here for a couple weeks and, just decided to stay.
That's cool.
Yeah, glad I did.
Yeah. It's kind of the similar thing. I came out to visit and I just immediately, I'm like, between the weather and the gigs and the players, I was like, oh, this is home.
There's a lot to like about LA.
Yeah. And I think that's really important to people in general in their lives. You got to find the place where you're supposed to be.
Yeah.
Because I was never happy in Denver. I always kind of dreamed of New York, but I don't know. It just seemed a lot harder it was a lot harder at the time.
Just living's harder in New York.
Yeah, exactly. Especially as a musician, you gotta, what are you gonna can't have a car. That's too expensive. So you're gonna lug your gear on the subway.
I mean, bass players like lug their upright bass on the subway and stuff. That never seemed attractive to me. And I never considered New York. Like I love going to New York and working in New York and playing there and stuff. But like living in New York is just too intense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whenever I'm there now, I'm like, oh man, so glad I didn't do this. But then maybe 3 hours after, I get the, I'm originally from New York. I was born in Poughkeepsie, so.
Oh, cool.
But I didn't live there very long. But it takes me, at first I'm just in shock. I'm like, the energy is so crazy. And, But after like 3 hours, I'm like, oh, okay, this is awesome. I kind of get hooked on it. But
no, it's cool.
It's really cool. But yeah, just the money. I mean, it's expensive here, but it's expensive there, but you don't get near what you get here for the same expensive. If that makes any sense.
Yeah. I mean, you can spend $3,000 a month in rent for like a closet in Manhattan. Yeah. Whereas like out here, if you spend that much in rent, you can get, a house.
Yeah. You'll have a house in the valley.
A month, Yeah. And it is expensive. It keeps getting more expensive here, but I feel like you can at least get something with some sort of size and space, whereas New York, everything's just so crammed together,
Man. And now you'll be coughing and sneezing a lot.
Yeah, I know, right?
The COVID was pretty bad out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's like a ton of people just, huddled together, it's just like in this compact
And they're walking,
city.
They're on the street all the time. Like out here, we're in our cars.
Yeah,
we kind of have a natural isolation that happens.
Yeah, and there's just more space out here, There it's just like a ton of people crammed into a small area.
Yeah.
Of course, it's going to spread there.
Yeah, but you can drink all night. It's so great.
Yep. Yes, you can.
And I've gone down that route way too many times.
Yep, and they've done that.
Living there would probably kill me. So you were into jazz when you got out of college. Same with me. I was like Mr. Jazz guy, but I went naturally into the smooth jazz thing. And so you played with Mindy Abair for a long time, and Jeff Golub I saw on your thing.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
All the stuff in the smooth jazz scene that I did came from Mindy. I was never really the guy that was like floating from artist to artist in that scene. Like I never got too immersed in it. Like I kind of fell into it. I was recommended for Mindy's band by Jay Gore and Jamie Tate.
Got you.
Did an audition. She chose me, and then I was in her band. And then from being in her band, we played with other people. Like we did some shows with like, Peter White a bunch of times. And we did a tour with Jeff Golub and David Pack, which was really fun.
Oh, cool.
And from that, like they would call me for their gigs sometimes every now and then. I did a record with Jeff, but I never got like too immersed in that scene.
Yeah.
Like there are some guys that are like, they just play with all the guys in that scene.
Yeah. That was me for probably 15 years.
Right. You're Greg and Keiko.
Keiko I was 12 years with her. And,
wow.
Yeah, it was cool. It had a lot of great experiences, and you got to play.
Sure.
And so coming out of that and into a pop thing, was that something that you did intentionally, or did that just happen? Or?
Well, I'd already kind of been in the pop circles a little bit. Like prior to Mindy, I'd done the Ali and AJ thing. They were a Disney act, Hollywood Records. I was with them for a couple years, and from that I went to Dancing with the Stars. I was doing the Dancing with the Stars tours.
Right.
And then after that is when I hooked up with Mindy. So I was kind of doing some diverse stuff before that, and then while I was with Mindy, I was also doing some pop gigs. Like some other things came up, and Mindy was cool about me leaving to go do a tour with somebody else. Like the Victoria Justice thing came up, and I did 2 summer tours with her.
Very cool.
And then Air Supply came up, and I kind of did that. I was kind of like juggling Mindy's gig and Air Supply and Victoria and all that for a little bit. And then some of the other stuff came up.
I remember you coming to my birthday. We were hanging at the 1-Up or something, and I was like, cornered you, and I'm like, dude, I heard you got the Air Supply gig. I'm a total nerd Air Supply fan since I was like 12 years old.
Yeah. Well, that's why
you got to let me sub on this gig. If you ever need anybody, just let me do it once, just so I can say I played with Air Supply.
Right. Well, yeah. And, that's when I did need to sub some stuff out. I was like, I got the guy.
Yeah. And then it just so happened like I subbed out that first week, and then I was supposed to do another week, and then in between Dwight Yoakam called, and so I had to subbing out of you.
Right.
And, oh my gosh.
It happens.
I felt bad about it, but it's one of those instances which is just how it works out here. It's like I can't
Yeah.
This is a steady gig,
Yeah.
and
most people understand. Like when that comes up, like most people do understand. Like that was kind of the thing with Mindy. Like when kind of higher profile things came up, and I was like, I'm gonna have to miss, a bunch of stuff. She was always just like, go do it. I get it. Like,
right.
It's good for your resume, good for your bank account. Like, go do it and come back.
Right.
And I think most artists are, will understand that.
Yeah, for sure. And so working with Air Supply though was also a great thing that it's like they say don't meet your heroes, but those guys are just awesome.
So great.
I couldn't even believe it. Like, I mean, I'm in my late 40s and I'm meeting these heroes from my childhood, and I do this professionally. We meet people all the time, but that was just like, I can't believe they're standing there and like they're praising me because I did good on the gig. It was such a great experience, but it was fun working with those guys, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, they're just so down to earth and laid back. They're of all the artists that I've worked with, they're probably like the most just down to earth. It's like you can joke around with them. You know.
Right. Yeah.
I always just bring up this one thing when Russell paid me $100 to tell him to fuck off. So, there's just like you can just joke around with these guys and they're hilarious, and
and that's so cool.
And they're cool because I don't have the same relationship with other kind of superstar pop artists that I've worked with. There's a lot more separation sometimes where you don't have that comfort level you do with those guys, and so it's just cool that they were that laid back. Like but before I went and played with them, I talked to Graham on the phone for a while, and then they had me come out to Vegas to check out their show, and we had drinks afterwards, and it's just, they're just totally cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, they're just guys that just love doing what they do. I mean, they've been doing it for 45 years now, and they do 120 shows a year, just total road dogs, and they just love what they do.
And the fans are great. They have diehard fans all over the world.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Well, I will always be in your debt for letting me sub on that gig.
Right on, man. Well, you obviously did a great job. They loved you, and
Well, thanks.
Yeah.
You also mentioned Dancing with the Stars. It's kind of a funny story because you were out on that tour one time, and Monique Coleman was on there, and my wife, she was my girlfriend at the time, was personal assistant for Monique Coleman.
Yeah.
So I had gotten off the road with somebody at some point. It was probably Corbin Bleu at that point. And Monique was like, just tell Eric to come out, because she had her own bus. And she's like, just tell Eric to come out and hang out. So I ended up just going for 2 weeks and staying on her bus and just being the guy in charge of like, where's the party tonight?
Yeah.
And so we ended up kind of hanging out on that tour.
Yeah, that was fun. That was cool.
Under weird circumstances.
Yeah, but that was a cool coincidence.
Yeah, it was pretty fun. I just remember though, like one night I was like, come on, man, we're going to party. Let's go do this. And you're like, we're in this big video game tournament in the back of the bus, man. I'm just going to be playing video games.
It's funny.
And I'm like, come on, man, we're partying.
Oh, man. We got into some pretty heated Mortal Kombat tournaments with some of the dancers, I remember. That was a good time. Those tours were great. I did 3 of the tours, and it was really cool. They took good care of us, and the band was great. And and most of the stars that were out there were really cool.
Yeah,
all hung out. And, Monique was really cool.
Yeah, and it's similar in a way. I mean, I did the High School Musical tours, and it's like a TV show, really. They were TV movies. You're a TV show.
Right.
So the budgets are different. They're not making their money off of this tour.
Yeah, there's other stuff. There's like sponsorships, and it's, there's TV money involved. And
so they end up being pretty cushy gigs.
Yeah, for sure.
Treated nice.
Yeah, that was a super cushy gig.
Wayne Newton was on that. I just remember... Yeah. I went to Staples Center to see you guys when you were in town because Monique was still considering doing it, and they're like, come out and see the show. Or she had just agreed to do it. So she's like, they come out. Because that was the other interesting thing about that. It's like stars came in and out as you were going.
Yeah,
like, it wasn't every night wasn't the same thing.
No,
like even the
rotating.
2 weeks I was there was, I can't remember exactly who was coming in and out, but it just seemed like it was kind of always moving. But I remember being at Staples and Wayne Newton, and I'm like, oh, what's this old guy going to be like? And that guy comes out, and this entire stadium of people are just enthralled. Like he's like, oh, this is old school.
He's royalty, man.
Oh my God. And his presence just standing on stage just blew me away. I was like, I'm getting chills just talking about it. Like he was just incredible. It's like that old school entertainer thing. I don't know that it exists anymore, really. He's the guy that would like sing a love song, like Frank Sinatra. I always say this about him. He'll sing you the sweetest love song, but then he'll kick your ass. You know,
Right.
He has this tough guy image, but he's nice. It's just a weird mafia, maybe presence. I don't know.
Sure, yeah. But Wayne was super cool. He was one of my favorites from all those tours because he was just a super nice, friendly guy. He had us all over to his house in Vegas. We had a day off in Vegas, and he had a little like barbecue. I want to say barbecue, but it was like, his catering staff cooked for us. You know, like he has this huge ranch in Vegas, and it was cool. He's just a super nice guy. His wife is really nice, and they were just a joy to be around. Total class act.
And I think the other thing about those guys is there wasn't any like, oh, I got to sing this song again. Like he's going to come out and do Dunkashin, and he's going to do it with all the joy that that he's done every night, and he gives and gives. It just feels like there's no bitterness or jadedness. He's happy to be able to do this song again.
Yeah, he's not like one of those guys that you would go out there with a smile, then immediately get off stage and light a cigarette and be like, "Oh God, this sucks."
Exactly.
That guy, he's like what you see on stage with him is like just him.
Yeah.
And people would always ask that. They'd be like, "Is he? How is he off stage? Is he like dark and bitter and jaded, or is he just like genuine?" I'm like, man, he's just a nice guy that obviously appreciates what opportunities he's had in life, and he's a grateful guy, and really nice to the people around him.
Yeah,
can't say enough good things.
Yeah, and as a musician and a professional, it's like I'm always looking at the old guys and being like, it's just a joy to see people still having fun. Like I saw the Rolling Stones a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And it was the same thing. It's just like, how many times have you played Satisfaction? But they look like they're having a blast,
Totally.
And they're still doing it. And like, I don't know. I hope that when I'm old and playing a dive bar somewhere, I'm still enjoying it.
Totally. I try to. I mean, I look to people like that just for inspiration.
Yeah.
As to just how I should be,
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And it reminds me of this one Instagram post I saw, like after a lot of shows, like I'm always looking at Instagram, just like hashtag whatever artist I'm playing with, just to see if there are any good pictures, I remember on an Air Supply tour, I was like looking at the Air Supply hashtag on Instagram, found this one post, and this guy said that like he took his girlfriend out on a date there as a joke because he thought it was going to be like super lame, like these old guys singing these love songs, and he was just like, holy shit, I can't believe I'm saying this, but Air Supply kicked ass. And it like he was like said a lot of good things about like Graham and Russell and how they talked to the crowd and stuff. And I was just like, yeah, it's cool when like someone is just like surprised like that.
Yeah, that's amazing.
They expect somebody to just kind of like phone it in.
Yeah.
But then when they like kind of really bring it, they're like, man, this is awesome.
And they've designed that show to not be cheesy. It's a great show. Like I took my wife, my young wife, she's 10 years younger than me. So generally the music I like is not the music she likes.
Right.
And Air Supply is still, older music for me,
Yeah.
So, but I'm like, you've never seen the show. You should just have to. They were playing close on Valentine's Day. So I'm like, this is perfect. Anytime you're going to see a cheesy love show, Valentine's Day is the day, right?
Yeah.
But and I just knew, and it kind of happened the exact same way. By the end of the show, she's like, well, all right, that's great. Because they're great performers. It's a great show. And a lot of their arrangements have been, we were talking about that the other night.
Yeah.
A lot of the arrangements are a little over the top. They're not like the record.
No.
But in the course of a show, it kind of makes sense, because you can't just sit and listen to ballads for 2 hours.
They have to make it exciting. They have to figure out a way to make the songs exciting for a live show.
Yeah.
It's one thing to put the record on and, you're having a candlelight dinner or something and it's appropriate, but like in a live show, like you can't just like play ballads and expect people to like be enthralled,
Yep.
Yeah.
So I think it's a pretty satisfying show for anyone.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
For sure.
Maybe we should just talk for another 3 hours about how much I love Air Supply.
I know, right?
Am I nerding out too much? Anyways.
Right.
Oh, man. We had a conversation probably a few years ago about, because I was playing in a wedding band, Impulse, kind of full time. You had left to do Shania and stuff, and I was like, "Well, I'm gonna get out of debt doing this wedding band, and then I'm gonna get back on the road." Because I had kind of done the road thing, and I took some time off to get married and spend some time at home, And then it was like 4 years in, and I'm like, I got to get back on the road, and I'm like, so this is my plan. I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna do that, and I'm gonna do that, and I'm gonna get back on the road. And you were like, yeah, but the gigs come when they come. You can't really force that situation, or you don't just go get a gig necessarily. And I was like, at the time I was like, I'm not sure about if I believe that or not. You know what I mean? Like, I think yes, but I think intention is kind of important. And like,
Sure.
I think that what you do on a regular basis, just by being a professional and being out there and talking to people and all that stuff, is how you continue to get gigs. So maybe you're not saying, I'm going to play with the Rolling Stones and you go get that gig, but by sort of doing all the stuff that you do, you do get gigs.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
It's not just about, okay, I'm ready. Sit back at home, wait for the phone to ring.
And I mean, I wish it were like that, to where like when you decide you want to go do a good road gig, you can go get it.
Right.
You know, for me, like chasing after a gig never worked. Like there were times when like I would hear that, you know, somebody was putting a band together for a tour or something, and I'd call the MD or something and say like, hey, I'm available. That never worked for me. The gigs that I got just came up randomly from like, you know, some other gig I did around town with somebody, and they're like, hey, I think, you know, this might be happening, you know, would you be interested? I'm like, yeah, cool. It'd be great. You know, or just like somebody just thinking of me and recommending me. But I've never actually gotten a gig by intentionally chasing it down, you know? And I think you're right. Intention has something to do with it. If you're like putting yourself out there, if you're kind of showing up around town, if people know that you're around, you're available, you're not on the road, you know, that can lead to people thinking of you when an opportunity comes up.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And that just, you know, that's just kind of expanding your network. I feel like the more people you know and the more good relationships you have with other like-minded musicians, you're increasing your chances of somebody thinking of you when something comes up.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I mean, it probably, you know, that's just how it worked for me. Like that whole thing about chasing gigs, maybe that happens for some people. I feel like there's no right or wrong way, or there's no definite way to make things happen in this town. It's like everybody's got kind of like a different way of doing things, and what works for somebody might not work for somebody else.
True. Very true.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And how much do you think, this is something that as a jazz player, and then because for me, I sort of really tried to transition out of that, because I did a lot. I was doing a lot of smooth jazz. That was my whole career for a while. And then I was playing with Lee Ritenour. We opened up for Kenny Loggins, and I watched Kenny Loggins play, and I was like, I'm a singer. Like, how did I get stuck in all this instrumental music, which is fun and it was neat, but I'm like, oh man, I want to write songs. And it just changed my whole direction. And it took me a long time to get to where I am now, where I'm playing with a great singer-songwriter and I sing every night. And that's really kind of the majority of the work on the gig for me is the singing. I mean, I play bass, but it's a pretty traditional country gig. So it doesn't require a ton of chops, you know, as far as the bass. It's more of a singing thing. But just transitioning from there to there, some of the things that struck me is like, for one, the look thing becomes a lot more important. Like in jazz, it was kind of like, if you had a cool shirt, just wear it every gig, because it's really about leading with your playing, and like you got to be a great player. And that's what was my whole world for like, I don't know, 20 years really, if you count Denver. And then we get to a place where it's like, oh, it's not exactly about the playing. And I've found if I go to Melrose and I spend $1,500 on some clothes, now I'm getting some different kinds of gigs, you know, dude.
Right.
Does that feel, I know that you tend to, you have a look when you're on stage, and that's something that, you know, it seems like you have put a lot of care into.
Sure.
I mean, how important do you think that is, compared to the bass playing itself?
Unfortunately, it's really important. And for a lot of artists, it's more important. And I've learned that, you know.
And it's not necessarily a judgment call. I'm not trying to call anybody out on anything.
No, that's just
it was
the way
really
it is.
Interesting to me that I had to shift gears in what I was leading with, sort of.
Yeah.
You know, I got to show up with a look first.
For sure.
And then before they're going to hear me play.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of artists choose their players based on pictures and videos. Like, no one wants to hear audio. They don't say like, oh, send me some MP3s or something. They say like, send me some photos and videos. Right. And a lot of artists would just be like, yeah, he looks cool, you know, and it is unfortunate, because music should always be first. And I've always thought that, I've always approached music that way, to where like, that's the most important thing always. But for a lot of artists, it's more image. So, you know, you got to be flexible in that, like, you know, you can kind of fit within that artist's image and what they want, you know?
Right.
You know, they want people that look like rock stars, you know?
Yeah. And do you generally think about an artist when are you dressing for the gig, or did you say, I'm going to just have a look and I'm going to look badass, which you do.
Thank
I'm
you.
not hitting on you or anything.
Thank you.
And then people are going to pick me, or like when you went, did you have to, well, here's another conversation probably, but did you have to audition for Gwen Stefani?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So when you showed up, did you think I need to dress like that gig, or did you just say, this is my look and this is what I'm doing?
I had already kind of like gotten a look for myself that I liked. Like as time, like when I was younger, I didn't really know anything about clothes. I just was unobservant when it came to that. I just kind of wore jeans and t-shirts and whatever, and just didn't really give a shit about it. And as time went on, like I think when I was doing the Ali and AJ gig, I was working with an MD, Zoo. I don't know if you ever knew Zoo.
Yeah, because I went on a tour with Corbin and Blue and Ali and AJ right after you quit.
That's the tour that I wasn't on yet. That's right. I forgot about that.
And when I saw that we were going to be, it was like a triple bill with Drake Bell.
Right, I remember that.
Corbin, Blue, and Ali and AJ. And I saw that was going to be the summer tour. I'm like, cool, we'd be out all summer with Derek.
Yeah.
But then I wasn't.
That's when Dancing with the Stars came up, and I just opted to go on that tour. But Zoo was the MD on my first Ali and AJ tour, and he was just totally into clothes. Like that guy would have like a stylist bring him clothes to rehearsal and stuff like this. And I just saw how much he thought about it and like put into it. And I was like, you know what? Like it is important. Like, you're on stage, you're expected to look like a rock star. And like from then on, I started thinking more about clothes and paying more attention and shopping more and looking at stuff. And I think I just got to a point where I'm like, I found certain stuff that I liked, that I was comfortable wearing, that I thought looked cool. And so I kind of like created my own kind of look, which isn't like over the top. I just, the kind of clothes that I like are like John Varvatos and stuff. Like I like the kind of like
really expensive,
but just kind of like the upscale rock star stuff where it's not over the top. Like, I never got into like the whole Hot Topic look, the emo kid look. I just kind of like that adult rock star kind of look, And so I just kind of like, that just became kind of my thing, And so like when I go to audition for somebody, I just dress like that, like dress how I normally dress. Like that's how I dress when I go out, And so I just kind of got to the point where I'm like, you know what, this is kind of my look. So this is what I'm going to wear to the audition, because I did overthink it for a bit. I think I did some auditions where I would look at the artist and look at their bands, like look at YouTube stuff before I auditioned to be like, oh, these guys kind of dress kind of outlandish, and that's stage wardrobe. That's a little different,
Right.
But like I started kind of overthink it, and I think I went too hard on some auditions, like with the way I dressed and stuff.
Interesting.
And I know that I did that on a Macy Gray audition, like because like her band kind of looks, kind of funky, like. And I kind of went a little bit over the top. I had like combat boots and suspenders and shit, and went to this audition, and I felt great about the audition, and like, knew all the stuff, got my backgrounds together, and I could tell from the get go that she just didn't dig me. She just wasn't really giving me the time of day, and she told the MD just like that. I forget what she said, but it was just like, I don't see me vibing with him, and I know it was just because I was like, kind of went too hard on the clothes, I overthought it,
right.
Where if I just like went as myself, maybe it would have worked out. I don't know. But like, yeah, I think I just kind of overthought it for a while, and then just got to a place where I'm like, I like that, like this is the look I like, and I'm just gonna, if I audition for something or do a gig, I'm gonna wear this because this is how I feel comfortable.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool.
And then like when you do a big tour like a Shania or a Gwen or something, there's wardrobe. They have a certain look they're going for, and luckily they've given us some freedom as well, and so they can just say, well, this is the look. It's going to be black. It's going to be this. We want like a military vibe. We want this.
Right.
And then we can just take those parameters and like put our our stage outfit together.
Right. No, that is cool. Yeah, I've been having wardrobe for so long. I don't even know. I don't know how to dress myself anymore.
Yeah. I mean, we have the Dwight wardrobe, man. That's intense.
Yeah, we've got jackets.
With the rhinestone jackets.
Yeah. That's really cool. Yeah. Well, yeah, I love it because it's like old school country on the top, but then we have skinny jeans and Beatle boots.
Right.
So it's kind of mod, on the bottom, it's a lot of fun.
Super cool.
And it also takes the pressure off of having to dress myself. So
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, when you're on a gig that like provides wardrobe for you, it's great. And you don't need to travel with stage clothes, and
Yeah.
It's cool.
I'm a rock star. So there are a lot of us out of work right now, waiting to get back to playing shows and touring. And I know I've had to do whatever I can do to take my mind off the situation from time to time. And one of the ways to pass the time is to catch up on some books you've missed. But if you're like me and you don't love to read, there's another way you can consume. Audible.com has thousands of titles to choose from, including audiobooks about music production, songwriting, the music business, music theory, instructional audiobooks, and biographies of your favorite musical heroes. But besides audiobooks, you can also listen to podcasts, theatrical performances, A-list comedy, and exclusive audio originals you won't find anywhere else. Right now, you can get a free 30-day trial if you visit audibletrial.com/divebarrockstar. That's audibletrial.com/divebarrockstar, and you can catch up on your audio reading. I'd like to take a second to thank you for listening to the Dive Bar Rockstar podcast. As a new podcast, getting the word out is a vital part of what it takes to keep the show on the road. Or off the road, as the current case may be. If you would like to support the podcast, all you got to do is subscribe wherever you listen. And if you have an extra minute or two, please leave a review. You can also share and follow the podcast on your social media apps. Okay, enough begging. I hope you're having fun, and once again, thank you for listening. You mentioned the wedding band that we played in. It's another thing that we have in common, just that we can play those gigs, and when we're off the road, it's a great source of income.
Sure.
But I feel like you've also used it, like you play key bass all of a sudden.
Mm-hmm.
Not really. Like you started a while back, but I didn't know you as a key bass player, but I feel like, didn't you kind of start doing that in the Impulse gig? And
I started doing it a long time ago. I think I started doing it like in another cover band I was in.
Mm-hmm.
And I just kind of got interested in it. And also, like pretty much on every pop gig, you would see the bass player playing key bass. So I think like early 2000s, I started getting into it. And when I was in another cover band, I was doing that. And then I was in this original band for a bit. That was like kind of like a cool jazz hip hop blend thing. And I played a lot of key bass in that.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I joined Impulse, the wedding band, I started bringing the key bass along because we did a lot of contemporary stuff and 70s stuff that had key bass on the recordings. And I kind of looked at it as an excuse to get my programming together, and get my playing together. I just figured like I'm using the cover bands for that would like kind of prepare me for the real world a little bit more,
Which I think is really smart, because I generally don't enjoy doing that kind of work, but obviously you got to. It pays really well, and if it's a good thing to have. It's another gig that I can do. It's a smart thing to take that and work on your skills there too, and use it for something bigger, so that you're getting something more out of it than just the $300 or $500 that you're going to get at the end of the night.
That's kind of how I thought about those gigs. Like, I mean, sure, it's a good way to fill in the gaps. The money's good, all that. But like, I was like, okay, well, how can I take this and gain from it? Not just monetarily. How can I hone my skills? How can I come out of these gigs being better than I was before? So I didn't need to do any vocals in Impulse. You have 4 badass lead singers up front, so like vocals were never required of me. No one asked me to sing, so I was like, you know what, I'm gonna just work on my synth bass stuff, and just try to get my programming together, try to match the sounds on the records, and try to build a library of sounds, which I have, and then all those sounds that I built from doing those gigs, like that's come in handy on other gigs. Like when I've had to do stuff with Gwen or Shania, like kind of the programming was already there from other tunes that I had to program sounds for.
That's great.
So it was, I just kind of always looked at those gigs as a way to just hone my skills for something else. Yeah. Because I never wanted to stay there. I never wanted to stay like that be my career. It was always like, this is great for the time being. Right. And this is filling in the gaps, but I want this to make me a better musician somehow. Right. Yeah. And for me, it was like the reading in that band that you mentioned before. It was pretty intense. So I was like, well, I'm going to get better. Yeah. And Bernie Dressel was on it at the time. Man, and it's just like keeping up with him and reading those charts. It's like, it was really, really challenging. And after going back and doing it for a couple of years, it made me better. Yeah, absolutely. That's a good thing. So you have probably one of the most extensive collections of gear that of anyone I know. Keeps on growing. Yeah. How many basses do you think do you have an inventory list? I do. I think it's between 25 and 30. Wow. Yeah. But I mean, I know guys that have more than that. Like I've got a buddy in New York who's, he doesn't play for a living, but he's a collector, and he's got like 150 basses now. And they're just like scattered everywhere. He's got like some at his in-laws' house, some at his New York apartment. He's got a lake house up in Massachusetts. He's got like 50 there. So we're always talking, nerdy about gear and stuff.
Right.
But yeah, my collection is has grown to about, maybe almost 30. And
so how do you pick what you're going to bring to a gig?
Just kind of think of what would be the right, situation for the gig, what kind of, bass and amp and effects and all that. And a lot of times if I think there's something better than what I have, I'll get it, like that's usually when I buy instruments, is when I have a gig.
Right.
I don't usually buy them when I'm just like, not working, because that's a bad time to spend money on gear. But
unless
like when
they have two necks.
Right. Yeah. Unless COVID hits and you're drunk looking on Reverb and you see a double neck Steinberger copy.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't done that, but somebody. I'm this guy I know.
Yeah. I went to dinner at your place the other day, and I meant to try to play it, but I forgot all about it. Yeah.
Another
I'm
time.
like, I got to play that bass. That just looks cool.
Yeah.
And it's fretless on the top.
Yeah.
And fretted on the bottom.
Yeah.
Which to me is like a great idea. It would be, I mean, I don't know about the Steinberger part, but it would be a great smooth jazz bass, because you could go back, do soloing. Like you just never have to change basses.
Yeah.
Because I'm like the opposite. I'm like a one bass dude. Like I have a 5-string.
Yeah, you got a bunch here.
I have like 10, but I use them in recordings, or they're just older basses, like that Modulus over there. And I'm in my studio now, so I'm pointing. Anyways,
cool.
That was like my main smooth jazz bass forever, and I was an endorser.
Awesome.
But then I got the Stingray.
Yep.
And I went to that for another 5 or 6 years is all I played. And then I got a Fender Jazz 5-string, and that's kind of my main axe. And I have the P that's 5-string.
Yeah.
But so it makes it easier for me. And I also think that's another thing that sort of struck me once I got out of the smooth jazz thing, because the smooth jazz in particular, it's like if you just have a cool tone, that's who you are. I felt like. Whereas now I'm in the country thing, and it's like, oh, you need a P bass with flat wounds, and you need, there's a certain sounds from certain records, and that's what that, or modern rock. It's a much more like, no, I want that vintage sound from that thing and that thing. Whereas I feel like the smooth jazz thing anyways, or contemporary jazz, it's like, no, you're kind of hiring me for that bass sound.
Yeah. You can kind of just have one bass and that be your sound, and that's you.
Right.
You're not trying to really emulate a record or a vibe or anything like that.
Right. So are you listening to a record when you're trying to decide? You're listening to the record.
Yeah, usually. And I mean, in most cases, the artist doesn't really know or care. Like,
right.
I mean, I could get away with playing the Shania gig on one bass. I could play a 5-string jazz or something, and I'd be fine.
Right.
But I also, with that gig, I can have several basses. Like we've got, I've got a tech that can do handoffs with me and maintain everything for me.
Right.
There's never been like a limit as to how much gear I can store or anything like that. So it's kind of like I can do different basses. So I do. I play a few different forms of P basses on that gig, different tunings. There's a few that few songs that I play a tune to step down, and they're still P bass, but they're like require a low D. So so I use a P bass tune to step down for maybe like 5 songs. I use a standard tune P bass for some of the more traditional country stuff she does. That's maybe like 3 songs, and then I don't really love playing 5-string. I play it when I have to. But a lot of the stuff with her was recorded in the 90s, and it has that low stuff, the low notes. So I play 4 strings that are tuned B-E-A-D. I've got 2 different 4 strings tuned B-E-A-D. And then actually one, for a couple of the songs, they've been knocked down a half step, so they're in B flat. So I tuned down to B flat.
Wow.
Just so I can, like on the end, hit like a thunderous low B flat. It's really cool.
That's cool.
And it's like, like I said, like I could get away with one bass on that gig if I wanted to, but I don't have to.
Right. Yeah.
And for me, like playing some of the more rock stuff or country stuff with her, I want to play a P bass. So, if I have to play a P bass tune to step down, like that's great.
Got you.
And then with Gwen, there's kind of like 2 sounds basically. Like her solo stuff, a lot of it is like kind of, more modern pop, and I play 5-string on that. I've got a Music Man Sterling 5 that I play on that.
Cool.
And that's just standard. And then like for emulating Tony from No Doubt, I need to have something that's just standard tune that just kind of has a pretty, aggressive tone.
Yeah.
So I'm playing a couple different Fano 4-string basses.
Got you.
On that.
That's cool.
Yeah, but again, it's like if I want to just play one 5-string on the whole Gwen gig, I could. She wouldn't know the difference. She wouldn't care.
Right.
But it's just because I can, I have a tech that, again, will hand me basses.
Right.
So because I can, I use a few different things. Yeah.
Cool. Got you. Yeah. And I borrowed your 4-string on the Air Supply gig. I think I brought my 5, and then I never played it. So I shouldn't say borrowed, but you offered. So I was like, well, I'll just have it there for the backup. Do you remember what songs you played that 4-string on versus the 5, or did you mostly play the 4?
I mostly played the 4. And I would have played that, if it were just left up to me, I would have played that whole gig on a 4 because all the Air Supply hits, I mean, that was done in the 70s and 80s. That's all P-bass pretty much, Right. But the guy who was on the gig before me, he was there for about 16 years and it was all 5-string and a lot of low stuff that I would have approached it differently, but because they were used to that, I had to come in with the 5-string. So there were some tunes that I felt I could just get away with playing 4-string, like Lost in Love was one. God, what was one? It's all a blur at this point.
Yeah, it's a weird question anyways.
But so I just tried to get away from the 5-string thing. Even with them, I played my basses tuned down. I played my P bass was it was that Mulan P bass that was tuned a step down, and my 5-string was a step down as well.
Oh wow!
And that was just because they had I think 1 or 2 songs that had a low. It was an A or B flat, and I just thought it was cool to hit that thunderous low note at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then
they're very much about low end.
Totally, yeah. But I tried. I don't love staying in that register on a 5-string. Like I said, I play 5-string when I have to. So I kind of got away from that, but I couldn't get away from it completely. Yeah. They were so used to that. The guy who had been doing it was there 16 years, so I didn't want to come in with something completely new. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the tricky part about coming in to any situation. It's like, there's the record. Do they want it like that? Or is it, there's the old bass player who's been there, but do I do it like that? And it's like figuring out the balance between, and then where are you in all of this?
And I always ask that when I started gig, what did you like or dislike about the guy before? Right. Because they might be like, oh, he played that 5-string all the time. I hated it. Then I would have been like, okay, 4-string. And I think with Air Supply was probably I just kind of asked and they were kind of indifferent, but the MD, Aaron, was probably like, well, they're kind of used to this. Maybe, try to stay with that. Right. But, with Shania or Gwen, they don't really know or care, as long as it sounds like the record,
Right. So you had a solo album a while back.
I did, about 10 years ago.
Which I thought was really great. I actually listened to it today
thank you.
To remember again. Great players and stuff. And I remember watching you at Cafe Cordial one night and buying a 8-track.
Yeah.
Which is totally a great idea.
Yeah, it was just like a packaging thing. It was I had these download cards that the artwork interfaced with the labels that I had made for these 8-tracks. So the 8-tracks weren't my music wasn't on the 8-track. The 8-track was just fancy packaging for the download card.
Because I remember you handed it to me and I'm like, I don't know what's on it, but here's an 8-track.
Yeah. I mean, I just bought I just went to the thrift store by my house and bought all the 8-tracks they had, and then put my own labels on them. I had a graphic designer make labels.
Oh, that's cool.
I just put the labels on the 8-track, affixed the download card to it, and then shrink wrapped it. I got a little shrink wrapper, and it was just kind of a fun way to fun way to package it.
Yeah, totally. Oh, that was brilliant. Yeah. But it was a great record too.
Oh,
a lot of great players.
Thank you.
Steve Ferroni was on that.
I had him do 1 track. Yeah,
that's crazy.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
Well, I had Brian Auger, the B3 organ player, on it. I toured with Brian for years, and Steve Ferroni was in Brian's band, Brian Auger's Oblivion Express. Steve was a drummer. Steve and Brian are real tight. And I hadn't done much playing with Steve. I think maybe I did 1 record with him or something, maybe a gig or something. But because I was going to have Brian on this 1 track, it was kind of a Brian feature. I kind of wanted to get Steve on it because, just have some of that old school Oblivion Express vibe. Yeah. So, Steve came in and played that 1 track with Brian. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, tons of great players. Check it out. It's called Let the Games Begin. But you also told me the other day, I don't know if you're announcing this, but you're working on a new record.
Yeah. I've been writing during quarantine. Nice. It's always been in the back of my mind that I need to do another solo project, and this was a good time to do it. So I've just been kind of kind of writing when I feel creative. That hasn't been every day, but like, when it's flowing, I've been coming up with some tunes and already set a date, already hired a producer in a studio.
Awesome.
And I'm really stoked. Jim Scott is going to produce it. He like produced all the Tedeschi Trucks Band records.
Oh,
and,
nice.
Did some stuff with like Tom Petty and Wilco and like tons of people. His resume is like, yeah, it's crazy.
Wow.
And I did one session at his studio about a year ago. Just did a record as a session player, and it's amazing. It's just like a playground of vintage gear. And I was kind of like, you know what? When it comes time to do a record, I want to call Jim and see if we can make something happen. And luckily, he was into it. So I think we're going to go in at the end of June, beginning of July, and
that's awesome.
Crank this out.
So then you'll have to come back on.
Cool. Yeah.
And we'll play some tracks. And
yeah, I would love to.
So is it going to be the same kind of more jazzy stuff, or
it's going to be instrumental, kind of instrumental groove kind of stuff,
Cool.
kind of similar to like some of the groove albums that John Scofield did, like John Scofield Band, like Uber Jam, Bump. There's 2 albums that have been kind of an influence. Obviously, it's going to be a little bit more bass focused. It's going to have some elements of like instrumental Government Mule and Black Crows, like some of that kind of like Southern rock bluesy kind of stuff as well.
Cool.
All old school vintage, like, P bass. Like I'm not doing any slapping on it or anything. It's all going to be pretty old school kind of stuff. Cool.
So do you slap much anymore? I don't think that I've slapped on a gig for maybe 10 years. It's
kind of gone out of style everywhere except the smooth jazz world.
Yeah, right.
It is slapping is alive and well in the smooth jazz scene.
Yeah. But it's like you spent so much time learning how to do it.
Yeah.
And now it's just like I don't even remember the last time I had to do it.
I know. I mean, I got really into it for a while. Like, I mean, Marcus Miller is still one of my favorite players ever, and Larry Graham.
Yeah.
And so I incorporated some of that on my first album, but this album I'm not. Yeah, I'm kind of in a different place.
Yeah,
and it's just like it's not in style anymore.
Yeah,
it's like people always make fun of it now.
Yeah, now it's like that's old music.
I know, kind of. Yeah, like slapping and fretless are like 2 things that are fun that I've spent a lot of time on, but are just not in style right now.
Yeah,
But I think like kind of the old school groove stuff will never really go out of style.
Yeah.
A P bass with flat wounds will never go out of style.
Right. Exactly. I know. I got to get one of those.
More gear.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I know. The recording thing is where it really gets fun to me to start switching up. And, I got plugins for days, so all kinds of different amps I can use and a couple in here,
Yeah.
But I don't know, the live thing, I guess I'm just lazy about it, really. I just want to go out and just have it there and just play and go home.
well, luckily, I mean, like the way technology is now, like that's easy to do. Like you can bring a Kemper or a Line 6 Helix with you and get pretty much any sound.
Yeah.
Any sound you can imagine. Like I use Kempers on the Gwen and Shania tours. I mean,
do you have any cabinets at all?
No, just offstage Kempers. And man, those things sound so good.
Yeah.
It's a magic box. It can sound like any amp or any effect.
Yeah.
They're great. It's like you can take that to any gig, like any local gig. You can just bring a little Kemper with you and have every sound you need,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
Well, thanks for coming, man.
Man, it's a pleasure hanging out and chatting.
Yeah. And as bass players, we don't, I mean, you tend to entertain sometimes, so I get to see you, but it's not like we.
But in general, bass players don't hang. Yeah, we never.
You don't end up on a gig together.
Yeah,
we're not on a tour together.
Yeah,
so it's always a pleasure. being able to talk to you and talk
Cool.
bass and talk
Likewise.
music. So
Likewise, man.
And I think you have a lot to offer because you're super successful and you've come out to LA and done it. Do you feel like you've made it?
No.
No.
I feel like any musician you ask, like,
Yeah.
I mean, we'll say the same thing. Like, I feel good about where I've gotten. Like, I've gotten to where I wanted to be. You know,
Yeah.
like I came here just kind of wanting to tour the world with big pop stars or big bands, and I've gotten to do that. You know, but I want to keep doing it. You know, I don't feel like I don't feel like I've reached some pinnacle where I'm like, oh, I can stop now.
Right.
I mean, sure, I could. I mean, I can look back saying, you know what, I had some great experiences and played with some great people, and that was great. But I don't feel like I've like reached the top or made it. You know.
Yeah.
I feel like I've just I've gotten to a point in my career where I want to be, and I just want to I want to sustain it. I want to keep doing it.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I think that's true too. And it's funny because you look at some guys, or like Lee Sklar or something, and you're like, this guy must never worry about anything because he's been on every record and he's got this great career. But I'm sure there's days when he's like, I don't have a gig. And, you know, it's like,
oh, sure.
I think that's the nature of being a professional musician. You're sort of never done. You know, I also used to say it's like they don't tell you, yeah, you got to pay your dues, but they don't tell you that you never really stop paying your dues.
It's true.
You know, and you can go from playing a stadium of 20,000 people to playing some dude's backyard party in a week. You
Absolutely.
know? And then back to the stadium. And it's like, that's really what it is, right?
Yeah. But I think it comes down to just the fact that we all love to play. You know, I didn't come to LA to make it. I came to LA to play music, you know?
That's
and
cool.
I think most musicians will say the same thing. Like, they didn't come here to like get famous or get rich. You know, maybe some did, but I think just the bottom line is we all just came out here to play and make whatever we could happen. You know,
right? Yeah,
you know, and that's
for sure.
That's kind of the bottom line. Like you know, if I'm not on tour playing stadiums, like I would love to go do a fun bar gig, and I do that. Like I do that in town. Like I got a couple like just kind of local bar gigs, like dive bar gigs, like you know, dive bar rock star stuff. You know, like that I do that are just fun. I mean, I've got to the point where the gigs I do, even if they're like bar gigs, they're fun with great people. Yeah. I'm not doing those gigs because I have to, because I need the $100 and you know. So there are certain bands and gigs that I won't do, that I kind of feel like I've been there, done that. But
and that's another great thing about LA is that you walk into any dive bar and generally the musicians are pretty high level. Yeah,
that's the cool thing. It's like I've got, you know, tons of friends, as you do too, that are just, you know, touring professionals that will do fun bar gigs from time to time. And it's a blast, you know.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's awesome, man. Well, you've definitely made it in my eyes.
Oh, well, thank you.
Thanks for coming over. Thanks for being on the show.
That was fun. Let's do it again.
All right. Sounds great.
Sweet.
I'm a dive bar rock star.
Man, I tell you, Derek is one of the greatest guys and one of the most professional people that I've ever met or ever worked with or sort of subbing for him. And I think that's my biggest takeaway, or the thing that I loved about it. Derek is one of the most prepared people I've ever known. And sometimes that's enough just to get you the gig over a more well-known or maybe even a more skilled guy sometimes. I mean, Derek is extremely skilled, but that little edge of showing up knowing the material or charting it all out for people, it really can put you over the top as far as getting gigs, because at the end of the day, we're talking about a job, you know. This is what it is. It's a job. People need you to do a job. So they don't always need the most incredible, flashy player that has all the crazy chops. It's really good to have those. Don't get me wrong. They're pretty important. But at the same time, preparedness is something that's often forgotten by some of the best guys. I mean, I'm not going to name any names, but you'd be kind of surprised at some of the people that fail to just be prepared and just show up to the gig, man, and ready to go, you know. It's such a tricky, weird thing. But Derek is just a really fabulous guy when it comes to all of that stuff. And he's a great hang, and it was really great having him on the show. One thing I'd like to clarify is that Air Supply is really Graham Russell and Russell Hitchcock, and they have a band that they're loyal to and stuff. But when we were saying those guys are them, I think we were mostly talking about those two guys who founded the band and wrote all the songs and sang all the songs. But they have a fabulous band. Aaron McLean is their musical director, so definitely go see them. But just wanted to clarify that. I hope you enjoyed the show. I really enjoyed making it, and we'll talk to you on the next one.
I'm a dive-bar rock star.
Wow, you've made it to the end. I'm hoping it's because you completely enjoyed yourself and are now filled with knowledge and inspiration to move forward with your dreams. If that is the case and you would like to stay informed of new episodes, live events, and general news, please go to divebarrockstar.com and sign up for the mailing list. If you have any questions, comments, corrections, or complaints about anything you hear on the show, please email me at fanmail@divebarrockstar.com, and you may even end up on the show. We at the Dive Bar Rockstar podcast, with all of our hearts, thank you for listening, and remember, it's all about dreams.